Joseph Smith bringing in the restoration of the gospel in this last dispensation. Did Jesus then fail? And I know what your answer is going to be, but explain to our audience how Jesus didn't fail in what he did and why Joseph was needed to do what Jesus didn't.
No, he didn't fail. That was all part of the plan to begin with, and I can understand why people think that when sometimes they are approached with the story of the restoration. But once they understand it, they see that was part of the plan all at once, from the beginning, all along. The Lord said that he would gather his people. In the latter days, he would gather them together, and that he would cleanse them of their sins, and that he would heal the breach or bind up the breach and heal the stroke of their wound. Mm-hmm. And in that day, when he would do that, it would be a marvelous thing that would do. He would sanctify his name that has now been blasphemed for how many years, decades, right, among the Gentiles.
So Jesus wasn't able to accomplish that?
No. It's Jesus that is accomplishing
it.
Okay,
then what does Joseph do?
Joseph Smith?
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea was that the testimony of Jesus was kept, the second testimony, the testimony that comes from Joseph, was kept from the world until the right time, when the Lord in his own due time decided that it was time for the second testimony of Jesus Christ to come forth. And Joseph then was his instrument in accomplishing that.
And do you know who Christians say the second testimony of Jesus Christ would be? Holy Spirit?
Well, it is. The Holy Spirit has witnessed to the Gentiles all these centuries that Jesus is the Christ. They didn't have any prophets of their own. Jesus wasn't sent to them to personally minister to the Gentiles, right? We don't have any record of any oracles of the Gentiles, but they were to be converted through the teaching of the Jews, witnessed and ministered to by the Holy Spirit.
Okay, so then let me just jump ahead in my question. Would a person have exaltation, which is equivalent to salvation in the Christian mind, without Joseph Smith?
Well,
yes or no, Doug?
Well, I have to try to understand. If you're asking me
if Joseph Smith never did what he did, and
if there were no Book of Mormon or whatever,
and Jesus only did what he did, Jesus did do what he did, but Joseph never did, would there be salvation, exaltation?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. There would have to be. If the Lord doesn't give us anything.
So then why is Joseph necessary?
I told you last week. There's a moral imperative. It's not Joseph, it's the Lord, and he's testing the faith of the Gentiles.
Okay. So now you know that Muhammad, they call him the second witness. They say Jesus, he's the final prophet. And you know that Islam says that the Quran is the most correct book on the face of the earth. That's in the preface to the Quran. So we have some parallels there to Jesus not really being enough. You have to admit, Joseph restored things that Jesus, when he came and did, were not able to continue forward. The gates of hell sort of did prevail against him, and Joseph had to restore. He had to restore back to earth things that were lost. How does that work?
Well, they're being lost today, so you can see how it works today, because many of the Christian churches are apostatizing at a rate that's alarming a lot of people. But this happened way back when the great and abominable church was formed. The devil was the foundation of it. And so the Lord had this not idea, of course, but this way we're putting it, that he would bring the Gentiles from the captivity that they suffered under that great and abominable church, yoked them down and brought them into captivity. And so the Lord had mercy on them, brought them to this land in order to take away their stumbling block and help them understand that they were in a state of awful blindness regarding the gospel.
Let me translate and tell me if I'm wrong, Doug. What Doug is essentially saying is Jesus came for the house of Israel, but when it came to the Gentiles, the Lord is merciful, and he continued, and he brought more light that was lost through the ages, through Joseph, to the Americas, and he's continuing to do his work, and essentially, is that what you're...
That's right. Okay. He brought forth the gospel, the fullness of the gospel, to the Gentiles first, see?
Right.
And then from the Gentiles it goes to the house of Israel to gather them in
Got it.
and then we see the fulfillment of Isaiah chapters 59, 60, 61, 62. It's amazing.
Isaiah is a very big book in Mormonism, and so is the Old Testament. You'll notice last week when asked about the Bible, Doug said he loves the Bible, especially the Old Testament. The Old Testament is concurrent with LDS beliefs in many, many ways, whereas the New Testament really does in many, many ways, shapes, and forms, Doug may not agree, counters to especially Pauline epistles, to what Mormonism teaches.